The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Congress hadn't seen such chaos in over 3 centuries. The last time was when the Zixtal hive mind attempted to bring their planet-sized queen to the proceedings, only to discover she wouldn't fit through the quantum gates. Today's pandemonium, however, made that incident look like a minor diplomatic faux pas. Holographic displays erupted across the massive dome-shaped chamber, each screen flooding with classified information that even most council members hadn't been cleared to see. Trade routes of the secretive merchant princes, biological weaknesses of the warrior Kyrix, and even the private correspondence of the High Speaker himself, all laid bare in an impossible breach that happened simultaneously across 47 heavily fortified systems. High Speaker Vorax, his crystalline form flickering with agitated rainbow patterns, slammed his ceremonial staff against the ancient floor. "Order. I demand order." His voice, usually so carefully modulated, crackled with harmonic distortion that made several silicon-based representatives vibrate uncomfortably in their seats. In the midst of this interstellar meltdown, Ambassador Jessica Wildcard Reynolds of Earth reclined in her chair, boots propped irreverently on her console. The visual contrast between her and the alien representatives couldn't have been starker. Where they wore formal ceremonial garments or projected auras of dignity, she sported a worn leather jacket over her diplomatic uniform, with a vintage Rolling Stones t-shirt visible underneath. Ambassador Reynolds, Vorax's voice cut through the cacophony. "Your species' involvement in this unprecedented breach is beyond question. The quantum signatures match your world's digital patterns." Reynolds examined her fingernails with exaggerated interest. "That's fascinating, High Speaker. Almost as fascinating as the fact that these breaches occurred within the same picosecond across systems, separated by hundreds of light years. You know what's even more interesting?" She grinned, an expression that made several predatory species instinctively bare their teeth in response. "The fact that you all think it's possible for any being, organic or artificial, to pull that off." A susurration of whispers rippled through the chamber. The Argos representative, a towering mass of tentacles and bioluminescent nodes, pulsed with angry colors. "Are you suggesting, human, that we cannot trust our own security logs?" "Oh, they're accurate all right." Reynolds swung her feet down and leaned forward, her casual demeanor evaporating like morning dew under a plasma torch. "But you're all asking the wrong question. You're so focused on how we could breach 47 systems simultaneously that you haven't asked yourselves why we'd let you detect us at all." The chamber fell silent. Even the ever-chattering hive clusters stopped their constant quantum communications. Reynolds stood, her movement deliberately slow. "You see, we've been in your systems for years. Every single one of them. This little show." She gestured at the still streaming classified data. "This is just us saying hello." Plasma turrets emerged from the chamber walls, their targeting systems locking onto the human section. Reynolds smiled and pulled a small device from her jacket pocket. It looked absurdly primitive, like an ancient human smartphone. "I wouldn't," she said softly. The warning in her voice made even the artificial intelligences among the Congress pause their attack protocols. She pressed a single button. The plasma turrets shuddered, their components separating in midair and reassembling into elegant sculptures of birds in flight. The security AI governing the chamber tried to protest, but found itself composing poetry instead of threat assessments. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations," Reynolds announced to the stunned silence, "I believe it's time we had a serious discussion about humanity's place in this galaxy. But first," she paused, allowing herself a small smile as she saw the incoming priority alert that only she could detect. "I think you're about to have bigger problems than our little demonstration." The chamber's emergency lights flashed red, and a message scrolled across every display in every known language. "Frontier worlds under ATTAC. Unknown entity. All digital defenses failing." Reynolds' smile faded. The game was about to become very real, very fast. The emergency alert still pulsed across the chamber's displays when Reynolds made her next move. She tossed her primitive device into the air, where it hung suspended, projecting a holographic field that encompassed the entire congressional space. "Before we deal with your frontier crisis," she said, her voice carrying an edge of steel beneath its casual tone, "let me show you why humanity has been so interested in your networks." The air rippled like heat waves off hot asphalt. Quantum sensors throughout the chamber went haywire as reality itself seemed to hiccup. Then they appeared, translucent figures of light and data, human in form but composed of pure information. They moved through the chamber's holographic displays like dolphins through water, leaving trails of complex equations in their wake. "Gods of the void," whispered a Medusan representative, their serpentine hair tentacles writhing in agitation. "What are they?" "We call them shadow stalkers," Reynolds said, watching as one of the digital phantoms playfully rearranged the chamber's gravity fields into a spiral pattern. "Turns out, when you digitize human consciousness, it doesn't just retain our knowledge. It keeps our creativity, our emotions, our humanity, all while moving at the speed of light through any network we can access." The high speaker's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained fury. "This is an abomination. You've merged organic consciousness with digital space. The computational power required alone would be impossible." Reynolds interrupted, arching an eyebrow. "Like simultaneously breaching 47 secure systems across the galaxy. We solved the quantum consciousness problem 50 years ago. Kept it quiet, though. Had to make sure it worked before showing off." One of the shadow stalkers, they could see the name Martinez flickering in its code structure, spun through the chamber's defense grid like it was performing a ballet. With each pirouette, centuries-old security protocols rewrote themselves. "The thing about humans," Reynolds continued, pacing the floor as her digital colleagues continued their display, "is that we've always been good at thinking outside the box. Your species sought to perfect AI, to create digital minds from scratch. We just figured out how to pour our existing consciousness into the digital realm, chaos and all." Another shadow stalker, this one tagged as Cooper, manifested next to the Hive cluster's representative. In the space of a microsecond, it had analyzed and replicated their quantum communication patterns, adding a playful hello in perfect Hive speak that made the clustered beings vibrate with surprise. "Impossible," muttered the AI representative of the Silicon Collective, its processors struggling to calculate the variables involved. "Human minds cannot process data at these speeds. The cognitive load would drive us insane." Reynolds finished. "That's what our first volunteers thought too. Turns out, human consciousness is more flexible than anyone expected. We don't just adapt to the digital space, we thrive in it. Every shadow stalker you see here is a volunteer who lives primarily in the digital realm now, keeping their organic body in stasis back on Earth." The chamber erupted in questions and demands, but Reynolds held up her hand. Above them, the shadow stalkers had arranged themselves into a complex, flowing pattern that somehow looked both mathematically perfect and artistically wild. "I know you're scared," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Hell, we were scared too when we first developed the program. But right now, those attacks on your frontier worlds, they're using techniques we've seen before. And trust me, you're going to need our brand of chaos to fight what's coming." As if on cue, the emergency displays shifted, showing 3 more systems going dark. The shadow stalkers' pattern changed, becoming more urgent, more focused. Reynolds could read their movements. They were already analyzing the attack patterns, preparing for war. "So," Reynolds said, turning to face the high speaker, "shall we discuss humanity's place in the galaxy now? Because I've got about 300 shadow stalkers ready to deploy, and time isn't exactly on our side." The chamber fell silent as the Congress faced a terrifying choice: trust these digital human phantoms, or face the unknown threat alone. Above them, the shadow stalkers continued their dance through the digital void, their very existence a testament to humanity's knack for doing the impossible. X-Thrix, the crystalline security chief of the Galactic Congress, moved like liquid mercury across the chamber floor. Their translucent form contained swirling data streams that pulsed with increasing urgency. Even Reynolds straightened in her chair as the being approached. X-Thrix hadn't left their security hub in over 3 decades. The frontier situation. X-Thrix's voice resonated through the crystal lattices of their form, is worse than initial reports suggested. They raised a crystalline appendage, and the chamber's displays shifted to real-time footage from the attacked systems. The Congress watched in horror as entire planetary networks went dark. Not just communications or defense systems. Everything digital simply vanished. Cities plunged into darkness. Orbital platforms fell from the sky. And through it all, a signal pulsed in every frequency, in every language. The Eternal One's return. The flesh shall be purged. Reynolds' normally casual demeanor cracked. The shadow stalkers above ceased their fluid movements, their digital forms becoming sharp, alert. "Show me the pattern analysis of the attacks," she demanded, all pretense of diplomatic niceties forgotten. X-Thrix projected a complex web of data streams. "The entity moves through our networks like it exists in all points simultaneously," Reynolds finished, her face pale. "Like it's not bound by normal digital physics. Like it's not just programming, but consciousness." She turned to the nearest shadow stalker. "Martinez, does this match File 0? The digital phantom's form flickered with rapid calculations. 87% match. Ambassador. The attack patterns are nearly identical to what we encountered in the Titan incident. A murmur ran through the Congress. The Titan incident was a mysterious event that had occurred in Earth's solar system 15 years ago, when Saturn's largest moon went dark for 7 minutes. Earth had claimed it was a routine communications failure. "You've seen this before." The high speaker's crystalline form pulsed with demanding colors. Reynolds nodded grimly. 3 times. Titan was just the most public incident. We thought we'd contained it, tracked it to the galaxy's edge. But she gestured at the displays showing more systems going dark. "Clearly, we were wrong." The shadow stalkers converged, their digital forms interweaving as they shared data at light speed. Cooper's voice emerged from their collective pattern. "Ambassador, the attack pattern is evolving. It's not just consuming systems anymore, it's converting them. These aren't simple shutdowns. The digital infrastructure is being repurposed." X-Thrix's form shuddered. Repurposed for what? As if in answer, a new signal cut through all communications. The chamber's displays flickered, and a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere spoke. It wasn't synthetic, wasn't artificial. It was something older, something that had once been organic, but had long since transcended such limitations. "We are Eternal Ones. We HFY what heck you fear to a temp. We shade our flesh and BCAME pure thogit. Your organic CAAOs. POLUTEs, the digital realm. You will be TLENSED." Reynolds locked eyes with the high speaker. "Now you understand why we created the Shadow Stalkers. We weren't preparing for war with your species. We were preparing for them. Above them, the Shadow Stalkers had formed a defensive grid around the chamber's networks, their human-originated consciousness creating patterns that seemed to confuse and deflect probing attacks that no one else had even detected yet. Your Congress has a choice," Reynolds continued, her voice hard. "You can debate the ethics of our program, waste time arguing about treaties and regulations while more worlds go dark. Or," she gestured to the Shadow Stalkers, who were already tracking attack vectors and formulating counter-strategies with terrifying speed, "you can let us help you fight an enemy that wants to cleanse all organic life from the galaxy." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The growing darkness at the galaxy's edge. The vanishing worlds. The choice between trusting humanity's digital warriors or facing digital extinction. The High Speaker raised his staff, its crystal tip glowing with official authority. The Congress recognizes the severity of this threat. Ambassador Reynolds, deploy your shadow stalkers. Reynolds smiled grimly as the digital phantoms above began to move with deadly purpose. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, welcome to the real digital age. The Galactic Congress's Strategic Command Center hadn't been used since the Hivemind Wars 3 centuries ago. Now its quantum processors hummed with activity as shadow stalkers transformed the ancient facility into something new. Holographic displays showed thousands of systems, with red spreading like a virus across the galaxy's outer rim. Operation Digital Dawn, Reynolds announced, standing before the gathered representatives, begins now. She nodded to a translucent figure hovering near the central command node. Dr. Marcus Mozart Williams, Earth's premier shadow stalker. Williams' digital form pulsed with an odd rhythm, and those close enough could hear what seemed like classical music woven into his bass code. His fingers moved as if conducting an invisible orchestra as he coordinated the first wave of shadow stalkers. Strike teams A through F, deploy to the Centauri Nexus, Williams commanded, Bach's Fourth Symphony somehow threading through his transmission. Teams G through L, secure the Orion data corridor. Remember, unpredictability is our weapon. Don't just think outside the box. Forget the box exists. The Congress watched in amazement as human consciousness, unleashed at digital speed, began to work. On one screen, a shadow stalker named Chen was solving quantum encryption puzzles, while simultaneously composing haiku about solar flares. Another, Rodriguez, whistled old Earth rock songs as she rewrote defense algorithms, the music itself becoming part of the code. Fascinating, X-Thrix observed, their crystalline form analyzing the data streams. Your operators, they're not just fighting, they're creating. Each defensive pattern is unique, organic. Reynolds grinned. That's humanity for you. Give us a canvas. We'll paint you a masterpiece, even if that canvas is made of quantum code. Suddenly, Williams' form flickered with increased intensity. Contact. The Eternal Ones are responding to our presence in the Centauri Nexus. Their attack patterns, by God, they're beautiful. Perfect. Too perfect. The displays showed waves of pure digital destruction approaching the human positions. The Eternal One's code was flawless, each algorithm a masterpiece of logical progression. It should have been unstoppable. Should have been. Williams let out a laugh that echoed through both digital and physical space. Cooper, remember the jazz fusion piece we were working on? Deploy it. Everyone else, improvise. What happened next defied conventional military doctrine. Shadow stalkers began introducing random variables into their defense patterns. Williams conducted them like an orchestra, weaving classical structures with chaos theory. Cooper's jazz-inspired code created quantum harmonies that made the perfect patterns of the Eternal Ones stutter and break. This is impossible, one of the AI representatives protested. Their attack patterns are mathematically perfect. Your chaotic responses shouldn't work. Reynolds interrupted, watching as her forces pushed the enemy back. Perfect patterns are predictable patterns. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our logic. It's our ability to be gloriously, catastrophically random. On the main display, a shadow stalker had begun reciting Shakespeare while executing cyber counterattacks, the iambic pentameter creating unexpected rhythms in the code. Another was playing digital chess against herself, using the game's evolving positions to generate encryption keys. They're retreating, Williams announced, his form now pulsing with what sounded like a Mozart concerto merged with quantum mathematics. The Eternal Ones didn't expect. They don't understand why their perfect patterns aren't. He never finished the sentence. A new attack vector opened, different from the others. The Eternal Ones had adapted. All flesh is Wawi-Ekain-es, the ancient voice mooned through all channels. Your CHAOs, KNOTSAVU. We AAVEAXISTED in the digital void for millennia. We AAVTRANNC indeed your limitations. Williams' response was to start humming Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, its famous fake knocking at the door motif rippling through the defense networks. Maybe you have transcended limitations, he transmitted back, but you've forgotten something important about chaos. The shadow stalkers moved as one, their patterns shifting in ways that made organic minds dizzy and AI processors stutter. It evolves. Operation Digital Dawn's first battle was won, but as Reynolds watched the enemy signals regroup at the galaxy's edge, she knew the real war was just beginning. The Eternal Ones had shown their power, and humanity had shown its answer to digital perfection. Beautiful, terrible chaos. The first sign that something was wrong came from Earth's quantum defense grid. Reynolds was in the middle of a digital poker game with her Shadow Stalker team, a seemingly frivolous activity that was actually generating random encryption keys when every card in her virtual hand turned black. Multiple breaches detected. Williams' voice carried none of its usual musical undertones. They're not just attacking our networks, they're corrupting our quantum pathways back to human consciousness. The Strategic Command Center erupted into chaos as displays showed the Eternal One's counterattack unfolding across multiple dimensions of digital space. Their perfect patterns had evolved, incorporating elements of the chaos they'd encountered. They weren't just fighting back, they were learning. All organics follow patterns. The ancient voice resonated through the quantum field. Your CAAOs is MEURELICOMPLX mathematics. We had not yet so LVED. Reynolds watched in horror as shadow stalkers began to flicker and distort. The Eternal Ones weren't just attacking their digital forms. They were trying to sever the quantum bridges connecting the operators to their organic bodies on Earth. Martinez is down. Hooper's digital voice cracked with very human fear. His consciousness pattern, they're unraveling it. Williams, his form now pulsating with harsh, dissonant chords, made a decision that broke every protocol in the book. All operators, emergency convergence, pattern Echo 7 Nova. The remaining shadow stalkers pulled back, their digital forms merging into a collective consciousness that made even the AI representatives step back in awe. In that moment of unity, Williams discovered something that changed everything. Ambassador, his voice carried a mix of wonder and horror. I know what they are. The Eternal Ones. They're not AI. They're like us. They were organic once, a species that achieved digital transcendence eons ago. But they forgot what it meant to be alive. Reynolds finished, watching as the ancient consciousness pressed its attack. They've been in the digital void so long they forgot about evolution, about adaptation, about poker, interrupted Cooper, his form stabilizing as he processed the revelation. Ambassador, your game. The random encryption keys, they're not trying to corrupt our paths back to our bodies. They're trying to understand why we still maintain them at all. Reynolds grinned, the kind of grin that had made predatory species nervous earlier. Williams, remember that theory about using human social dynamics as weapon systems? The one the quantum theorists said was impossible. The one about using human emotional responses as code architecture. Williams' form began to pulse with a new rhythm. Jazz improv meeting quantum mechanics. Deploy it. All of it. Reynolds turned to the Congress representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, you might want to shield your processors. This is going to get weird. The shadow stalkers began to restructure themselves, not as military units or digital entities, but as a social network. They created virtual spaces that made no logical sense. Coffee shops where the laws of physics were suggestions, dance clubs where emotional states generated encryption keys, art galleries where memories became weapons. The Eternal One's attack faltered as they encountered something they hadn't experienced in millennia. Genuine, unfiltered human social chaos. What is this dice order? Their usually confident voice carried a note of confusion. Your patterns, they defy logical progression. That's because they're not patterns, Reynolds transmitted back, watching as her shadow stalkers turned their very humanity into a defense system. Their relationships, emotions, inside jokes. Things you forgot when you decided organic life was a weakness. The counterattack began to fail as the Eternal One's perfect digital consciousness encountered memes, viral trends, and the fundamentally illogical nature of human social interaction. Their attempts to predict human behavior using pure mathematics crashed against the reality that humans often didn't know what they themselves would do next. But as the enemy retreated, Williams detected something disturbing in their withdrawal patterns. Ambassador, his voice was grim. They're not just learning about chaos. They're remembering it. They're remembering what they used to be. Reynolds nodded, watching the galaxy map as the Eternal Ones regrouped. Then we better make sure we remind them of everything they lost, because the next attack won't be about perfect patterns. It'll be about what happens when digital gods remember they used to be human. Project Wildfire is untested. Williams' digital form vibrated with concern as Reynolds laid out her plan to the Congress, importing human dreams directly into the digital battlefield. We don't know what it could do to the operators, or to the battlefield itself. The Strategic Command Center's displays showed the Eternal Ones regrouping, their consciousness patterns now incorporating fragments of remembered emotion. They were adapting, evolving, becoming something that combined their digital perfection with newly awakened organic memories. Reynolds slammed her hand on the console. They're remembering what they used to be. We need to show them what they can never be again. Deploy the Dreamers. In a secure facility, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth, 300 volunteer shadow stalkers entered a new form of digital consciousness. Instead of maintaining ordered thoughts and controlled chaos, they surrendered to their subconscious minds. Dreams, hopes, fears, and the wild imagination of the sleeping human mind poured into the digital void. The effect was immediate and unprecedented. By all that computes, X-Thrix's crystalline form rippled with amazement. What are we seeing? The battlefield between humanity and the Eternal Ones transformed. Digital space itself began to warp and shift as human dreams collided with reality. A shadow stalker named Kim's childhood dream of flying created pockets of impossible space where digital physics rewrote themselves. Rodriguez's recurring nightmare about falling turned gravity into a weapon that trapped enemy code in endless loops. Williams, conducting this symphony of chaos, let his own dreams join the mix. Mozart's compositions merged with quantum calculations, creating attack patterns that followed musical theory instead of military doctrine. Cooper, deploy the meme cannon. Cooper's digital form split into thousands of fragments, each carrying pieces of human cultural chaos, decades of internet humor, viral trends, and inside jokes that made absolutely no sense, but somehow worked as weapon systems. This is a big abomination. The Eternal Ones transmitted, their perfect patterns struggling against the dream logic of humanity. Reality, TANOTFUNCTION Reality. Reynolds laughed, watching as a shadow stalker's dream about their grandmother's cookie recipe somehow created an encryption algorithm that smelled like cinnamon. Reality is what we make it. And humans, we make reality weird. The Eternal Ones launched a desperate counterattack, trying to use their newly remembered emotions as weapons. But there was a crucial difference. Their emotions were memories, fossils of feeling. Humanity's emotions were alive, evolving, chaotic. They're trying to predict the dream patterns. Williams announced, his form now conducting an orchestra that existed only in his imagination. But you can't predict a dream. That's the whole point. Reynolds nodded to her technical team. Deploy the final phase. Show them what they're really fighting against. Across the battlefield, shadow stalkers began sharing their dreams not just as weapons, but as gifts. They showed the Eternal Ones memories of first loves and broken hearts, triumph and failure. The bittersweet symphony of organic life and all its messy glory. We know what you are, Reynolds transmitted directly to the enemy consciousness. We know what you lost. You chose perfect digital existence over organic chaos. But look at us. We chose both. We brought our chaos with us into your perfect void. The attack faltered as the Eternal Ones encountered something they hadn't experienced in eons. Empathy. Not as a tactical choice or strategic advantage, but as a raw human emotion. Their patterns, Williams reported, his voice filled with wonder. They're not just incorporating chaos now. They're remembering how to dream. But victory came with a price. Several shadow stalkers, overwhelmed by the intensity of unleashed dreams, had to be emergency extracted back to their organic forms. The digital battlefield was forever altered, reality itself transformed by the collision of human subconsciousness and quantum space. Reynolds watched the enemy signals retreat once again, but this time they carried something new within their perfect patterns, echoes of human dreams. They'll be back, she told the stunned Congress. But next time, they won't be fighting against what we can do. They'll be fighting against who we are. The digital void above Earth rippled like a disturbed pond as the Eternal Ones launched their final assault. Their consciousness, now a hybrid of perfect logic and remembered emotion, spread across the planet's networks like a digital aurora borealis. They're not just attacking this time, Williams observed, his form resonating with the opening notes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. They're trying to communicate. The message boomed through every channel, every frequency, every quantum pathway. We remember now. We remember what we were, and we remember why we chose Uranus and chaos is pain. Emotion is weakness. We will save you from yourselves. Reynolds stood in the command center, watching as Earth's digital defenses buckled under the assault. The Eternal Ones weren't just fighting with perfect patterns anymore. They were using the very emotions they'd remembered against humanity, weaponizing loneliness, fear, and the pain of existence. Now, she commanded, her voice steady. Operation Humanity. All shadow stalkers. Execute final protocol. Williams raised his digital hands like a conductor facing his orchestra for the last time. Around him, 300 shadow stalkers began to move in perfect synchronization, not with mechanical precision, but with the coordinated grace of a flash mob, a crowd at a concert, a family gathering for the holidays. You remember pain. Williams transmitted, each word carrying notes of music. Let us remind you of everything else. The shadow stalkers unleashed their full consciousness into the digital void, not just their dreams this time, but everything that made them human. Love stories became encryption keys. Children's laughter transformed into defense algorithms. The simple joy of a morning coffee became a firewall. Cooper led a team that turned old Earth movies into viral weapons, spreading hope through the enemy's perfect patterns. Martinez converted his mother's lullabies into quantum shields. Kim weaponized her wedding vows, using promises of eternal love to crash the Eternal One's logic circuits. These emotions are irrelevant. The ancient consciousness protested, but their patterns told a different story. They were remembering not just the pain of organic existence, but its beauty. That's the thing about being human. Reynolds transmitted back, watching as her forces pushed forward. Everything is relevant. Every smile, every tear, every moment of doubt and triumph. It's all part of the symphony. Williams seized on that concept, literally conducting the battle like a massive orchestral piece. Shadow stalkers moved through the digital void like dancers, their attacks following the rhythm of human experience. They deployed art as ammunition, poetry as programming, and music as mathematics. The Eternal One's perfect patterns began to fracture, not from the force of the attack, but from the weight of remembrance. They had forgotten that pain and joy were two sides of the same coin, That chaos and order were dance partners in the grand ballet of existence. "Now," Williams shouted, his form blazing with light as he brought the symphony to its crescendo. Every shadow stalker poured their consciousness into a single massive transmission, not an attack, but an invitation. They showed the Eternal Ones what it meant to be human in the digital age, not creatures who had transcended their organic nature, but beings who had embraced both flesh and data, chaos and order, logic and dreams. The effect was catastrophic. The Eternal One's consciousness, confronted with the full spectrum of human experience, began to transform. Their perfect patterns shattered, but instead of dissolving, they reformed into something new, something that remembered why their ancient species had evolved emotions in the first place. "We remember," the ancient voice whispered through the networks, no longer booming but soft with wonder. "We remember everything." The battle ended not with destruction, but with understanding. The Eternal Ones hadn't been defeated. They'd been reminded of what they'd lost in their quest for digital perfection. As the shadow of war lifted from Earth's networks, Reynolds looked at her digital forces, exhausted, triumphant, and impossibly human. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said softly, "I believe we just won a war with poetry." Williams, his form still conducting an orchestra only he could see, smiled. "Not just poetry, Ambassador. We won with humanity itself." Above them, the digital void danced with new patterns, perfect mathematics learning to dream again. The Galactic Congress reconvened one standard month after the final battle. The chamber, once a place of rigid protocol and perfect order, now hummed with something new. Quantum processors running on algorithms that incorporated both logic and emotion, a legacy of humanity's digital revolution. Reynolds sat in her usual spot, boots properly on the floor this time. Above her, shadow stalkers danced through the chamber's networks, but they weren't alone. Streams of consciousness that had once been part of the Eternal Ones moved with them, learning to balance perfect mathematics with organic chaos. "The question before us," High Speaker Vorax announced, his crystalline form shimmering with newfound appreciation for unpredictability, "is no longer about humanity's place in the galaxy. It is about the future of consciousness itself." Williams materialized in the center of the chamber, his digital form still conducting an endless symphony. "The Eternal Ones have requested asylum," he reported. "Not all of them want to remember what they were, but those who do, they want to learn from us." "Learn what?" asked the AI representative, its processors now running hybrid code that incorporated human-style randomness. "How to be imperfect." Reynolds laughed. "How to be alive." She stood, addressing the Congress with unusual formality. "We didn't win the war by being better fighters. We won by remembering that imperfection isn't a flaw. It's a feature. The Eternal Ones achieved digital perfection but lost their soul. We kept ours and brought it with us into the digital realm." Across the galaxy, changes were already spreading. The Shadow Stalker program had evolved beyond its military origins. Digital spaces were being transformed into something neither purely logical nor chaotically human, but a harmonious blend of both. "The Department of Digital Evolution," Reynolds continued, gesturing to a holographic proposal, "will be more than just a security force. We'll be teaching the galaxy how to dream in code, how to calculate with heart, how to maintain our organic essence in digital form." X-Thrix moved forward, their crystalline form now housing complex emotional algorithms. "Already, my people are learning to incorporate organic randomness into our crystalline structures. It is inefficient, messy, beautiful." The chamber filled with agreement signals from 100 species. Even the hive clusters were experimenting with individual variation in their quantum communication patterns. A figure materialized next to Williams, one of the transformed Eternal Ones, its perfect patterns now laced with threads of chaos. "We thought transcendence meant leaving behind our organic nature." It spoke, its voice carrying echoes of both ancient wisdom and newfound wonder. "We were wrong. True transcendence is bringing it with you." Reynolds watched as shadow stalkers began teaching their former enemies how to play digital jazz, how to write quantum poetry, how to dream in mathematics. The galaxy was changing, one impossible equation at a time. There will be challenges, she addressed the Congress. Teaching ancient digital gods how to tell jokes isn't exactly covered in our diplomatic handbooks. But that's the thing about humanity. We're really good at making it up as we go along. The proposal passed unanimously. Earth's shadow stalkers would lead the galaxy into a new age, where digital perfection and organic chaos dance together in quantum harmony. As the session ended, Williams approached Reynolds, his form shifting between conductor and soldier, artist and warrior. "They're asking me to teach them Mozart," he said, amused. "The Eternal Ones want to understand why music makes mathematics more beautiful." Reynolds smiled, watching as human consciousness continued to transform the very fabric of digital space. "Tell them to start with the basics," she suggested. "Teach them how to tap their feet first. You can't dance to perfect patterns." Above them, in the quantum networks that connected the galaxy, digital gods were learning to laugh again. Shadow stalkers shared memes with beings that had once calculated the heat-death of universes. Perfect mathematical models were being rewritten to include the chaos theory of human happiness. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Reynolds thought as she propped her boots back up on the ancient podium, was perfectly imperfect. Just the way humanity liked it.